Bare necessity, but simple bare necessity. Bare necessity, but simple bare necessity.
Hey there, it's Bree Bear and welcome to today's video. I am going to be doing my wrap up for May and June. So, in my past several wrap ups, you may have noticed over the last couple I think the last 2 years or the last year and a half, I've continued to evolve and progress into this new format that I've been doing, but I find that I am going into depth a little bit too far on some things so that it makes it too long. It'd be a pain to edit. So my new goal is to try to kind of improve that just a little bit. So hopefully I will get that a little bit better. We shall see how it goes. But for now, let's go ahead and get into the stats. I'm going to have everything pulled up here on my laptop, so I will be looking down to read some of these numbers off to you guys. But let's start out with total books read was 13. Total pages read was 3,202. 2 books were rereads and the other 11 were first time reads. For the age ranges, or the target audience, however you want to identify that, we have 2 children's books, 2 middle grade, 7 YA, 1 new adult, and 1 adult. Okay, so for format, this is whether it was physical, digital, and if it was digital, what kind of digital. Okay, so we have 3 that were digital, we have 1 audiobook, no ebooks, and 2 PDFs for audiobooks. Next up we have the form of writing. We had 11 books that were told in prose, 1 in verse or poetry, and 1 that was a graphic novel or manga. So now for my star ratings, I had 0 1-star books, 1 2-star, 2 3-stars, 4 4-stars, and 6 5-star books. So kind of a little bit more spread out. Okay, so now let's talk genres. Genres is a little bit spread out as well these 2 months. I read 1 nonfiction, 1 poetry, 2 thrillers, 2 dystopians, 3 contemporaries, and 4 fantasy. Okay, so those are all the stats. Let's go ahead and move into the books. The first book was Bedtime Meditations Volume 3 by Anna Kelly. This was published in 2020. It's a children's short story collection for bedtime stories. So it kind of doesn't fit into any one specific genre, but I marked it as fantasy. I did narrate the audiobook for this title. My thoughts are pretty much the same as the other ones, so I'm going to link to the review in the description box for the other ones, but honestly I don't have a ton of thoughts. They're pretty simple to get through and pretty simple in their stories and things like that. There's not a ton to say. And I gave this 4 stars. Okay, so the next book that I completed was Music of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This is the second book in the Strange the Dreamer duology. This is a 2018 YA fantasy. It was a first time read, and I read it physically, of course, as you can tell. I did start this book before the beginning of May, so it was carried over into these 2 months, and it took me a while to read. I was just in this phase of not really focusing too much, and I also had a readathon end up kind of breaking up this book as well. So for those reasons, it just kind of worked out that way. All of my notes on representation, trigger warnings, controversial topics, archetypes, and themes. So for diversity representation, we have LGBTQ, and we also have an orphaned character. For trigger warnings, we have a pretty long list. We have blood and mild gore, we have butchering, we have dead animals, we have denial, judgment of LGBTQ people, self-harm, unforgiveness, cheating, adultery, hitting and slapping, abuse for emotional, verbal, and physical. We have suicidal thoughts and suicide. We have forced marriage, rape, mind control, which is magically done, but it is present in, so if things like gaslighting are a trigger for you, then this might be in this way as well. Electric prods, like a cow prod type thing. caging humans, particularly children, manipulation of emotions magically, loss and grief, depression, and revenge. As far as controversial topics, there were some sexual innuendos, if I can words, and there is lust as well. For archetypes, we have siblings, particularly sisters. It kind of brings up the question, how do you stop someone from crying? How do you lead them out of fear? Can hate be reversed? Can revenge be diffused? Some of these are actually direct quotes. So this one is a direct quote. For that instant, at least, it seemed one and the same, as though all the anguish exists in the same well, no matter what loss or misfortune leads us to it. We might be at odds, hate each other, and desire each other's destruction, but in our despair, we are lost in the same darkness, breathing the same air as we choke on our grief. Other archetypes include revenge, the gray area between good and evil, learning to let go. Who would you be without the burdens you have carried, and who will you become if you let those burdens go? That was kind of a combination of themes and archetypes. For a synopsis of this book, I am going to send you to the link below where I gave a synopsis for the first book. Move into some of my thoughts of this book. Some of the things I disliked in the first book were carried over, specifically like the flowery writing. If I had to read one more description of somebody's lips in being compared to fruit, Lord, that was annoying. There were a few things that could have been delved further into, I feel like, and there were a couple of plot holes. However, honestly, for the most part, I absolutely loved this duology. There were such intense relationships. Each character is extremely layered and complex, and that is one of my favorite things, is how the characters, there was no like good side, bad side to this duology. It's very much like that there is so much misunderstanding each other and so much tension of, you know, how your past mistakes affect your current relationships and have affected other people. The world in which this is set is super creative and super beautiful, honestly. Just like for a book lover, this kind of world, I don't know, just something about it is very, very magical to be a part of. Like, not just because it's fantasy and it has magic in it, but also just because it's like, it has a connection to books and things like that. It's just a very, very enjoyable world. The themes in this are really, really strong, and I very much appreciate that. In a lot of books, the themes are a lot softer, and in this, it's where it's strong enough that it makes its point, but it's not like you have to actually sit there and analyze the themes of the story if you don't want to. The conclusion was extremely satisfying, though there is some heartbreak to the ending of the story. It is a satisfying conclusion. Overall, I give Muse of Nightmares 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I completed was Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. This is a 2009 YA dystopian. It was a reread for me as well. This is the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy. I'm gonna have the synopsis linked below, but that's also going to tell you any triggers and representation, things like that, that are included in the book before it in the Hunger Games, some of which will carry over into book 2. For diversity and representation, this does include mental illness representation, especially that of PTSD. We also have a ton of trigger warnings, so I'm going to list those off. Police brutality, gun violence, grief and loss, PTSD, wastefulness, uprisings, rebellions, whipping, starvation, jokes about suicide, which was a problematic element in my opinion, stroke possibly for one particular character, drug abuse, gore, wound, injury, itching, mental illness, blood, and cutting. The archetypes are rebellion, uprising, and love triangle. Some of the themes are wastefulness. One of the big questions about this series is, at what point did the people in the Capitol forget that it's real people that are on that screen in the Hunger Games, and what happens when those people are forced to remember that those are real people. So as far as my personal thoughts on this book, I'm just gonna throw it out there, Katniss is not my favorite, to be honest, and that's just like me not really liking her as a character, but also as a person. So there was at least one plot hole I made a note of. I'm not sure if there were multiple ones that I noticed, but I know there was at least one plot hole within this particular installment in the series. Also an element that was not previously planned by the author. You can tell that it was kind of just like pulled in here, that we have one idea of like what kind of person a character is. It's a very minor character, but in this book we're given like a completely different idea of this person, and so it was kind of like just unplanned and not well transitioned into. So we have the love triangle, which I'm not a fan of, particularly in this instance. I'm not a fan of love triangles in general, but for me to actually enjoy them, they have to be done well. Example. So in this series, I just am not a fan of the love triangle because I don't think it's done well. So things that I did like is that I like the setting of this one even better. And I'm gonna say that as vaguely as possible, but like when they go to the place, I like this one better. Basically, I like that we get to know the tributes a little bit more, and like who's going into the arena a little bit more in this one than we did in the first one. In the first time of going into the arena, we didn't get to know like we didn't even have, most of them didn't even have names, so that was kind of annoying. I feel like the relationship and character development within this one is much better, because it's not just based off of their past experiences, and like we're not just hearing stories about like their past, but we're actually seeing things happen and their reaction to it in a way that is causing the characters to grow. There are also some callbacks to specific lines and quotes that I really liked. All in all, Catching Fire is, I think, my favorite installment in the trilogy, and I would give it probably a 4.5 if I was a half-star person, but I'm gonna round it down to a 4. Alright. This is a 2012 kind of middle grade, I would say, contemporary, and it's kind of a graphic novel-ish. It's like a cross between a graphic novel and like an illustrated book. It's a very interesting book because of the size. It makes it like harder for me to distinguish. I don't know, like I feel like a book of this large size is more of an illustrated book, but then like the way that it's broken up on the page is like a graphic novel. I don't know. Well, as far as diversity representation, we have a Spanish speaking character. As far as trigger warnings, we have bullying, especially in regards to body image and body image issues in general. We also have smoking, thoughts of death and suicide, and depression. As far as archetypes go, we have a friendship breakup, we have a loner, lonely person, outsider type person. It is a Jane Eyre retelling, which in that it's not like an actual retelling of the story of Jane Eyre, but rather like Jane is reading Jane Eyre, and it like her story parallels in some ways. It's actually set in Canada, so I wanted to point out that it was a Canadian setting, and it's actually more specifically in French-speaking Montreal, and the character is into journaling. As far as a synopsis of the story, so we have Helen, and she's bullied and struggles with her body image. She's lost all of her friends and she feels utterly alone. She finds solace in reading. Her current read happens to be Jane Eyre. This young Canadian girl wonders if Jane will find a happy ending, and maybe, just maybe, she might be able to find one for herself too. The thing about this book is that I have legit like barely any dislikes. There was one element within the retelling part, or like the summary of Jane Eyre, that I didn't like, and it was really just because it wasn't accurate. It was wrong, like not how the story actually went, but it was like not the biggest deal, but it was just inaccuracy is all. And there was one writing choice that I was not a fan of. I understood in a way, but I wasn't a fan of that choice. I felt like it just wasn't the best message to send. So many good messages, and I think it's something that every kid needs to experience and read. This got a 5 stars from me. This book that I completed was Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. This is the 3rd book in the, what do you call it? Hunger Games trilogy. Wow. Brain dead. Let's pretend that didn't happen, okay? This is a 2010 YA dystopian. Again, the synopsis will be linked below, as well as the other trigger warnings from earlier and the ones from book 1 all kind of bleed into this one as well as themes and all that stuff. Depending on that, we also have representation and trigger warnings for memory loss, and we do have a mute character who uses sign language. So, as far as trigger warnings go, we do have triggers for a pandemic, being used as like a political pawn, being, quote, mentally disoriented, war, hospital, wounds, gore, amputees, hanging, death, evacuation, execution, sex trafficking, poison, being burned to death, bombing, war, drug addiction, electrocution and prodding, mentally unstable, self-hatred, self-harm, beating, emotional trauma, grief, loss, and withdrawal. So yeah, there's a lot going on, in other words. Okay, archetypes include music and song being included in a book, evacuation, and there is a bunker scene, or a section of this book that takes place in like a bunker. Okay, so then we also have, as far as themes go, where is the line when it comes to war, and what is crossing it? So like, what actions and choices are crossing a line of like what's okay and what's not okay within war. Things I did not like, there were a few cringy things and some plot holes. There were also some choices by the author that I wasn't a fan of. I kind of understood some of them, but I didn't like it could have been better, I feel like, personally, if it had been done differently. And overall, it is a mostly satisfying conclusion. There are some good feels that you do get to experience, and it is an enjoyable setting as well. In pretty much the whole thing, honestly, in every part of the settings that are used for the story, I feel like all of them are pretty enjoyable. Overall, I was kind of conflicted on my rating for this one. I kind of feel like a 3.5 if I was a half star, but I rounded it up to 4. Because I feel like I like it more than book 1, but a little bit less than book 2. So I rated it the same numerically as book 2, but like in order they would be that way. It's like book 1, book 2, book 3 in the middle. A video about this trilogy, talking about completing it for the first time, because I had never read Mockingjay before. I had read the other 2 previously, but I never finished the series. So I will be doing a video talking all about my experience of finishing the Hunger Games, so make sure to stay tuned for when that comes out. The next book that I completed was Tell Me 3 Things by Julie Buxbaum. It's a 2016 YA contemporary. As representation and diversity, we have a pretty good list. We have LGBTQ, Jewish, Asian, specifically Korean. We have anxiety, prescription medication specifically for anxiety, Christianity, although the representation for Christianity is awful, IBS, asthma, carpal tunnel, myopia, although those 4 are referenced to as, quote, nerd ailments, so take that as you will. Spiritual unclarity, scoliosis, and medical marijuana. Triggers is a pretty long list too. We have death and loss of a sibling and of a parent. We have elopement. We have ADD. There was a joke about ADD actually, so take that as you will. We have stereotyping, specifically of LGBTQ and the blondes. We have bullying, body negativity, regret, cancer, specifically ovarian and lung. anxiety, prescription for anxiety, underage drinking, and being drunk, parents having marital issues, a parent remarrying, suicide, drug addiction, drug abuse, rumors, a parent encouraging weight loss. The exact quote is that the character's mom said she could be gorgeous if she only lost 10 pounds. This isn't like the mom actually saying it. It's like somebody saying, it's kind of like hearsay, but it still doesn't matter. It's still there. There's also soliciting of a prostitute, tax fraud, LGBTQ derogatory terms, specifically the F word, cutting, eating disorder, psychological institution, whispering, telling secrets in a group setting. I know that's kind of obscure, but it's there. And I don't know. I was on a roll, okay? Controversial topics. There's quite a few. There's profanity, there's body fluid being mentioned, which, like, ew, in my personal opinion. So I put it out there because I don't like hearing about some things in books. And, like, it was to a point where it was, like, too much. Too much. Okay. Internet dating, democracy versus dictatorship as parenting styles. And, like, just the discussion of parenting styles in general, I guess, is honestly a controversial thing. Parents providing alcohol for underage drinking. Discussion of sex and sexual anxieties, desires, etc. Talk of running away. Internet pornography is briefly mentioned, and teen sex. Archetypes. Moving, new school, AV classes / accelerated classes, poetry lovers, use of technology and pop culture being referenced, books, readers, book lovers, the not like other girls trope, miscommunication trope, secret identity / secret admirer trope, and people making assumptions. Okay, now let's talk about some themes that I feel like were addressed in the book. I'm sorry I keep messing with my hair. I just hate when it like starts to look flat on the top, so I have to like reconfigure it, and then it like looks weird, and I'm gonna try to ignore it, but like it's kind of impossible to ignore because it's like the majority of my human is actually my hair. When something bad happens, you begin to think other bad things can happen too. Working through the joining of two families, teens and questions, concerns, and anxieties about sex, rich versus middle class, being callous about the harder parts of people's lives. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, see chapter 28 or 26, sorry. You're stuck with you no matter where you go. Friendship is two-sided with two people who both need the spotlight. Money can't buy you exemption from hard life experiences. Synopsis time. Jesse's dad got remarried, so they're moving to a new fancy school in LA. After a rough first day, she gets a message signed Somebody Nobody, or SN, in her email. SN begins to help her navigate through her new environment, but it also adds a challenge. Who is this secret messenger, and what did they hope to gain from all of it? Honestly, I'm kind of conflicted about how I feel about this one in particular. I have a lot of dislikes and a lot of like enjoyment in it. At the same time, it's very confusing. Dislikes are honestly just, there's some pretty poor choices that were really insensitive. Others were like just not well thought out. Like, for example, some of the people who could have potentially been SN that were like led to believe, it's just stupid. It's like in any way that wouldn't make sense at all. Like, at one point it's considered that one of the characters who is gay could have been SN, who's gay, and like also due to their connection to this character, it wouldn't make sense based on the fact that SN is like flirts with her and like stuff like that, you know. Another person like clearly can't be it because of stuff to do with a mother of SN versus the mother of this person. Like, that wouldn't line up. It's just like stupid things where it's like if she thought about it at all, it wouldn't have made sense and wouldn't have been logical. And honestly, like, you start out the story kind of just knowing who SN is and kind of waiting for it to unfold. Not gonna lie. It could have used a boost in character development, I feel like. There was a little bit, but it could have used quite a bit more, I feel like. I did like the story overall, the idea of it. And there were some nice quotes here and there. And the relationship development was pretty good in a couple of spots. She developed relationships with a lot of her friends, with her new family and her dad as well. So there was like a lot of growth in the relationships. So that was good. Overall, the problematic elements at one point made me almost give it a 2, but I decided to give it a 3 because I did enjoy it in a lot of elements, and because it also has this aspect of like it's not as cringy as another book, the other book that that I did give two stars to. And so in the end, I ended up giving it 3 stars. Next few books were completed during the Vaultathon, so keep that in mind. This next one was an audiobook during Vaultathon, and it is called For Everywhere. It is by Steve Burns, Stephen Drozd, and Gabe Surya. It is a 2019 children's fantasy. A couple of little trigger warnings for parents having marital issues, fighting, divorce, separation, and also the child kind of feeling at fault for the above, what I previously mentioned. Archetypes include music and musicians, mixed feelings, loneliness, found family, unspoken connections. There is an Edgar Allan Poe reference, which I enjoyed. There's a battle of the bands / music competition. As far as themes, practice leads to improvement. I didn't put this down, but also I would say probably like family communication and that kind of thing. I didn't type on a synopsis for this. Whoops! Okay, synopsis would be that this story follows a character who is the last unicorn in the land, and he wants to make friends, so he decides to start a band. The dislikes, there were some incomplete circles and topics that like were started on, but they could have been expanded, I feel like, and the pacing was not the best. All in all though, it was very enjoyable, really cute. The performance was amazing. Throughout the entire audiobook, there's like sound effects and music included throughout, and the voices are really well done as well. It has some really cute and good messages as well, so all in all, pretty good. I give it 3 stars. The next book was Damsel by Elena K. Arnold. Alright, so this book is a 2018, technically it's marked as YA, but I am calling it new adult because it is, at the very least, should be marketed as new adult, so that's what I marked it as. It is a fantasy, sort of. It's weird. We'll get to it. For representation, there is an orphan type character who is alone, doesn't have family. For trigger warnings, loss specifically of a parent, memory loss / amnesia, rape, unwanted sex abuse in various ways, toxic masculinity, toxic relationships, male dominance, animal abuse, and killing of animals. Controversial topics include sexual content, feminism, profanity, gender roles, toxic masculinity. Archetypes and tropes include glass blowing. That's it. That's all I had for it. It's such a weird book, man. Okay, and then themes. This is a direct quote. He followed his father and made a game of stepping just where his father had stepped before him, hopping from place to place, since the king's stride was easily 3 times the length of his own. Next is also a direct quote. Alma did not mind. She found herself not terribly attached to her body and what others might think of it. Another direct quote. Surely we are more than just the men we serve. Also, it briefly mentions stress and its effect on health. Before I continue with anything else about this book, with the synopsis and everything, basically this is all I can say. This book is not a fantasy fairy tale story, which is what you're led to believe. It is a commentary on feminism and toxic masculinity. There is no other way to easily explain this, but it's a commentary on things. It's not like just a novel. I don't know how else to say that. Okay, see, let me read the synopsis and you'll understand when I explain further, but like, this is the synopsis they give you, okay? The right has existed for as long as anyone can remember. When the king dies, his son, the prince, must venture out into the grey land, slay a fierce dragon, and rescue a damsel to be his bride. This is the way things have always been. When Amma wakes in the arms of Prince Emery, she knows none of this. She has no memory of what came before she was captured by the dragon, or what horrors she faced in its lair. She only knows this handsome young man, the story he tells of her rescue, and the destiny of sitting on a throne beside him. It's all like a dream, like something from a fairy tale. As Amma follows Emery to the kingdom of Harding, however, she discovers that not all is as it seemed. There is more to the legends of the dragons and the damsels than anyone knows. And the greatest threats may not be behind her, but all around her now, closing in. So, that's the synopsis that you're given. So based off of the synopsis, it sounds like it's going to be like a fairy tale with a twist, right? And I mean, sort of. But no. Not at all. It's this book. Here's the thing about this book. This is not a book that is intended for you to just read it for fun, or just like read a fantasy book and then like it have like themes underlying. No, it is like trying to punch you in the face with a theme, and the fact that it's fantasy is kind of secondary. I don't know how else to like fully express how it like is presented versus how it is. But that is one of my biggest complaints about this, honestly, is that it is marketed completely different than it really is. It's marketed as a fantasy book with a twist, with a feminist kind of twist to it, but it's not. It's just a feminist commentary, and furthermore, it's marketed as YA. It is not at all. At best, it's maybe new adult. At best. It's very inappropriate for YA. Keep in mind that YA is technically 12 to 18. 12-year-olds gross in a lot of areas. It is icky in a lot of areas. It talks of urine constantly. It refers to the man's yard a lot. This book had intentions, but the execution was absolutely awful. It did not come through or portray things well. Instead of putting forth the right story or the right ideas, it was like the opposite. It was like, instead of being pro-feminist, it became anti-marriage and sex in general. Like, that like all sex is a man trying to abuse a woman or, you know, dominate her, is like how it comes off. And like all marriage is a man trying to control a woman. Like, that's how it comes off, legitimately how it actually portrays things. It's just really, here's the thing. I appreciate the idea of this book, and I think it was a genius concept. But like the choices, especially the choice of the ending, the most disgusting thing, and I hate it. in every way. I hate the choice of how this book ends. Nothing about that is okay, honestly. Like there's this one part of it that's okay, but then like the part before that is not okay at all. Oh my god. Oh. No. Here's the thing. There are a couple moments that I feel like were really good and empowering in this book. So I'm not giving it 1 star. I'm giving it 2. But like at some points in this book, it could have easily been like not even a 1 star from me. Like, wow, what an... Oh, I don't even know what to think about this book. Like, it's like one of the weirdest things I think I've ever read. And not weird as in like a good weird. Weird as in like a bad weird. I don't even know what else to say about this other than I give it 2 stars. And just if you choose to pick this up, know that it's gonna be kind of gory and graphic about icky things, and that it's a commentary on gender roles, toxic masculinity, feminism, sexual abuse, things like that. It's a commentary. It's not a fantasy story with a twist. It's not a fairy tale with a twist like you think it is. Okay. That's all I'm gonna say about this. But like, I'm done thinking about it. I'm done talking about it. It's going on my shelf and I'm not gonna look at it for a long time. After that reading experience of that book, during the Vaultathon, going from For Everywhere of 3 stars to the weirdest book that I have read so far this year, probably, of Damsel. I didn't know what to anticipate, but I was like, okay, we're gonna read this book next, and hopefully it will not fail me. Next book that I picked up during the Vaultathon was, and I think I actually picked it up like immediately after. I don't even think I like left any time. I was like, I need to like cleanse my palate, get this book off my brain, and read something else. So the next book I picked up was The Things She's Seen by Anlin and Ezekiel Quamelina. This was released in the other half of the world as Catching Teller Crow was the title. But it was released under the original title in Okay, so it was released as Catching Teller Crow in 2018, and it was released in the US as The Things She's Seen in 2019. It is a YA thriller, kind of paranormal-ish, kind of mystery-ish. It's kind of like an investigation tale for a lot of it, with like that kind of vibe, but like a little bit paranormal and with like a little bit thrilleriness like woven in there. It's kind of confusing to describe the genre of this book, but it's marketed as a thriller, so that's what I marked it. Okay, so this book has Indigenous, specifically Aboriginal representation, and that is own voices. The authors are Aboriginal, or Aborigines. Wow, words are hard. They're actually siblings too, so that's fun. It also has an interracial relationship, and it includes a children's home or like an orphanage type situation. There's also quite a few trigger warnings, so I'm going to list those off. We have racism, specifically police racism. I can't get my words out today. There is a car accident. There is grief and loss of a parent, a child, a spouse. There's also a fire involved. There are drugs. There's a heart attack referenced. And there's a lot of time during the story that's spent in a hospital. So I wanted to point that out. Discussion of a parent who left for like left with another woman or man, I can't remember which way, but they left. And then there's disappearance, like a missing person situation. There's blood, injury, and gore. It's kind of like more just a guesstimation. It's only really mentioned once, but there is a character who like pulls their hair out, so I did include a trigger warning for trichotillomania, But there's also an allusion to cutting. It's not like specifically stated, but it's like kind of alluded to. As far as archetypes go, we have an investigation. It's kind of like a detective type feel to it in a way. We have a small town, specifically small town crime. There is it's kind of like a mystery investigation type story, and kind of style, with kind of like speculative elements and then like a twist at the end type of feel is kind of how it's written. Themes. The real true themes are learning to let go, fear of leaving a loved one behind when you pass away, and also mistreatment of Aboriginal peoples and Indigenous people in general, but specifically this one is about Aboriginal. Our synopsis is that our main character, Beth, died in a car accident. However, she isn't completely gone. The only person that can see her ghost is her father. So Beth spends all of her time with her dad, and as he is an investigator of sorts, she helps him out with his investigations. Lately, though, it hasn't been too exciting because the company that he works with, or like the agency type thing, they haven't been giving him hard cases or anything difficult since he's in this stage of grief. They think that it's best to give him easy stuff. He wants the challenge, but they're not really giving it to him. However, a case kind of slips through the cracks where they thought it was simple and easy, but turns out there's a lot more going on in this small town than they originally thought. And so he gets his hands on a rather interesting and complex case, which leads them to a rather interesting young lady who has her own tale to tell. The thing about this book, there are like a few minor things that I didn't like very minor, like as in there were just a couple of parts that were a little bit confusing, but oh my god, I loved this book. Oh my god, oh, it was so incredible. Oh, it was so good. It's like everything. I mean, it's about grief and loss, but it's a thriller, but it's like a mystery, but it's like, oh my god, it's so incredible. Wow. Like, wow. It's so artfully written, and it's something that I need to reread because I want to see if I can figure out all of the things that I wasn't able to puzzle together. So you kind of know from the beginning, you kind of figure out pretty early on who's involved in the crime, but you don't know what the actual crime is, and like the full details of the crime. Like you get like bits and pieces, but you don't know how all the pieces fit together. There are lots of breadcrumbs all throughout the story, but you can't piece it fully together until the very end. And wow, is it incredible. Oh my god, I love this. And like, can we talk about how freaking crazy it is that this amazing story is packed into such a short book? Like, I don't even understand. I don't even know, man. It's amazing. Like, there's character development and relationship development, and it's like there's a whole crazy mystery, but it's all packed into like this freaking couple of hundred of pages. Like, is legit less than 200 pages, just under 200. My mind is literally blown. This is going on my favorite shelf because it's freaking incredible. And like, can I be real with you? I picked this up because of the cover. My grandmother was obsessed with butterflies, and so when I see butterflies, I kind of freak out a little bit, and I have to buy things that have butterflies, even if I don't necessarily need them. But then like, it paid off this time, okay? It paid off. I absolutely adore this book, and it is one of my new favorite things in life because it's like the perfect combination of like a sad contemporary and like a mystery thriller. Oh my gosh, it's just so... Oh. And like, when I was looking at the reviews, I was surprised to see that people were not as big of fans as I am. Like, I'm very confused by that. A lot of people weren't as like into it as I was, but okay. Each to their own, I guess. I guess part of it is also because it's not as popular. So a lot of those reviews are not from like big reviewers, but like, you know, people who just like kind of put their opinion, and if it's like just something that didn't interest them. Like there was one person that like said this book wasn't for me and they rated it 1 star, and I'm like, that's not really fair. If it's just that it's not for you, that doesn't mean it's 1 star. That's not fair. I didn't mention this, but I think it was pretty clear, but I gave this 5 stars. I forgot to say that. Okay, the next book that... Ooh, hair. Okay, whatever. The next book that I completed was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. This is a 2014 YA thriller. Specifically, I would call this a psychological thriller. This was a reread for me, and I also read this during Voltathon. Diversity and representation includes Indian, as in from India. I hate that. I hate when people call indigenous people Indians, because like as far as like indigenous in America, Indians, because we're not Indians, we're Native Americans. Just saying. Okay, we're natives of America. We're not from India, which is Indian. Just saying. Like, and even like other natives will say Indian, but it just drives me nuts because it's too confusing. Like, just cancel that terminology and quit using it because it's too confusing. Anyways, we also have representation of migraines, particularly post-traumatic headaches, or PTHA. And it is an Own Voices review for migraines. You're welcome. You're welcome for having head pains. It's helpful, I know. But the representation of migraines throughout, as an Own Voices reviewer, is absolutely incredible. The way that the migraines are described, the pain, and like the artful way that it's expressed is just like, there have been so many times that I have described a migraine like in such gory detail, and the way that the book represents that, different various kinds of pain, because like a migraine feels different on different days and it's different kinds of pain. It's not always the same kind of migraine, and your side effects are different. It's just such an interesting ailment to have chronic migraine. Anyways, let's move on to trigger warnings. We have divorce and cheating, loss and grief, for various types of relationships, or like the character who is dealing with the loss and grief, has very... I'm gonna stop talking. We have favoritism, manipulation, heart failure, PTHA, like I mentioned, brain injury, specifically traumatic brain injury, trauma in general, actually, greed, abuse of drugs, medications and prescriptions as well, underage drinking, death of animals, cutting and blood. There is a use of the word gypsy. It's by a character, so I mean, it's not like it's the author's views or anything, but I wanted to point it out because it's not really, it kind of goes uncorrected, it feels like, but it is a character saying it, so I kind of wanted to explain that a little bit. But then you have depression and PTSD and repression of memories. As far as controversial topics, there is a little bit of discussion about religion, about belief versus disbelief. As far as archetypes, we have an island, we have a wealthy family. It really does focus on family, and it's kind of follows a character trying to regain lost memories. As far as themes, we have consumerism and materialism. Cadence Sinclair, our main character, lives on a private island with her family over the summers. Or at least she did every single year, every single summer until her accident. For 2 years after her accident, she suffers with migraines and a lot of repercussions in her health and things like that. And so instead of going to the island, she ends up going and spending the summers with her dad in Europe one year. I don't know if it's both years or just one, I don't remember. But for 2 years, she's like gone. Then she finally gets to go back the next year. When she finally gets to go back this summer, she's determined to fill the gaps in her memory and also reconnect with her little group that she loves so very much. They're known as the Liars. It's her, two of her cousins, and there's also this other boy who's like connected to the family but is not related to them. And it's like a close friend and also Katie's crush. But it kind of just follows her trying to discover what happened and all of that. It's kind of just her trying to figure out what happened, why things have changed so much, because there's like definitely a change that she can feel and see. She's trying to figure out what happened. As far as things that I disliked, I can't think of anything, honestly. Like, I don't have any complaints. I love this book. Even on reread, I absolutely loved this book. I wanted to reread it because there's an element that's kind of left open at the end, and I wanted to see if there are hints throughout, but there's really no definitive way to know, and the author has given no definitive answer in any kind of interviews or anything like that, so it's just left up to reader interpretation. And man, it's an experience. Man, but this has maintained its 5-star rating for me. I still absolutely love it, and I think I might end up putting this on my favorite shelf too, I'm not gonna lie. I have a problem. I have a serious problem. I have too many, like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 favorite shelves. I have a problem. It's another one for Vaultathon, but it was Born to Love, Cursed to Feel by Samantha King. And this is a poetry collection, so it's going to be shorter to talk about because there's not as much to say when it's a poetry collection, okay? This is a 2016 YA poetry collection. When it comes to poetry collections, I don't think they're specifically categorized as like YA or adult, but I just kind of categorize them based on the vibe of them, and this vibes to me as a YA, so. Anyway, this covers topics of homelessness, drugs, sex being used wrongly, cheating, being wanted only for sex, addiction, withdrawal, relapse, trust issues, feeling like you're not enough, physical abuse and commitment issues, and then controversial topics that it covers. Those were like the trigger warning topics, and then this is the controversial topics: unrequited love, breakups, feeling like a failure, brokenness, friendship, pursuit of happiness, and long distance relationships. So, all in all, I don't really have anything else to say. I don't have any complaints in particular, which is very nice. But the things that I really want to point out about this one is that it's not like a lot of other poetry collections that are in this kind of like genre of poetry and like this era of poetry. It's not like a big feminist commentary or statement. It's not like trying to be all feminist about things. It's just a girl talking about her feelings, and some of them are good and some of them are less good, but all of them are valid feelings. I mean, like, some of them are positive feelings and some of them are less positive feelings, but they're all valid. But yeah, so it's a very different collection, but good, and I like it. And honestly, I was kind of stuck between like a 4.5 and a 5, so I went ahead and rounded it up to 5, because a lot of people were like not as big of fans of it, and like some people were rating it like really low because they thought it was like shallow, but I didn't agree with that. So I wanted to kind of balance out some of those bad, less good reviews by giving it the boost. Like, see, that's how I sometimes judge my rating, is based off of like how I feel when I read somebody else's review. If it like feels offensive to me and like it bothers me, then I'm like, okay, then I do like this that much. I do like this enough to help out the author, because like sometimes I want to, you know, help out the author, and so I'll round it up because I feel like the author needs that boost. Like if it's like a highly rated one, then I'll round down. And I'm okay with that. So we are almost to the end, ladies and gentlemen. The next book that I completed was the last book I read during Vaultathon, and that is I Can Make This Promise by Christine Day. Goodness, stop texting me. Stupid group text. Okay, so this was a 2019 middle grade contemporary. So for representation and diversity, we have Indigenous representation, we have adoption, there's a high school dropout, and also the main character gets braces, so I put that in there because, like, I mean, it's middle grade, so I feel like it kind of fits into the category of, like, the representation of getting dental. I don't know how to describe that, but, like, if you've ever had braces, you'll understand. It's a category, okay? Trigger warnings: being teased and bullied, divorce of parents / separation of parents, being forced away from culture, or like away from your culture specifically, cancer, and arrhythmia. It took me a second to say that. Sometimes words are hard. Okay. Archetypes include family. We have the main character is an artist. She's into art. We have family tree / genealogy. Summer. It's set in summer. Film, specifically a film festival. That is actually not accurately represented or like accurately like done. It's not quite right, but it is a part of the book. Orthodontic work / getting braces. Acting. The LA Dream. Friendship breakup, and finding biological family. So, themes. Not all Indigenous people get to feel connected to their culture. Wrongful treatment of Indigenous peoples and their history / culture. Broken trust, and Indigenous representation within the media. Or rather, misrepresentation within the media. Let's be real. Okay, so synopsis. I actually kind of gave up when I was writing out the synopsis for this, but basically it follows this character named Eddie, and she has a very happy life with her family. Her mom was adopted, and to her knowledge, they don't really know anything about her family or anything like that, but then Eddie finds a box in the attic, and it has information in it that makes her question whether what she's been told is true. Yeah, that's kind of like, there's a lot of subplots to it, so there's a lot of other things going on, but that's like the main plot, so we'll leave it at that. As far as dislikes goes, the main dislike was the lack of research that went into the film things. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but basically it's like as if these kids, like this girl is an artist, okay? And she draws by hand, but in the story, in the book, she ends up like doing animation stuff for this short film thing that they're doing, but like realistically, no. No. It ain't that easy. Ladies and gentlemen. And like the time frame was also, as far as like for them making that film as well, especially with their lack of knowledge of anything about how to use the program that they downloaded, which is not something that their dad would just download for them for fun, because like, guess what, it ain't cheap. Like Adobe Suite as like a student is still like at least $400, even with student discount. That set aside, everything else is really good. I really connected to this book because, for those of you who don't know, I am part German and part Native, part Cherokee. I'm somewhere between like a 4th and a 16th Cherokee. I know that seems like a big gap, but it's like somewhere in between. I just don't know exactly where in between. But because I'm like kind of down the line a little bit, I'm very distanced from my heritage in that and my culture there. Like I don't get to have that same connection to it, and I don't like, it's like I don't get to really claim my heritage as much, you know what I mean? It feels like, and like I was raised in a very white lifestyle. Like we don't have culture of Native American, we don't have like the Native American cultural influences here at our house, you know, those kinds of things. So I really connected to a lot of the elements of those types of things because I feel like this character also feels that in some ways. I feel like they're a little bit more connected in that, like, I mean, they went to a reservation for like, what, 4th of July or something, but you get the idea. Actually, I don't think it was 4th of July, but it was some sort of celebration. It seemed like 4th of July though, because they were doing fireworks. I don't know. They were celebrating something, okay? I really connected to the character and some of the things because of that, and it really inspired me to continue my journey of continuing to become more connected with where I come from and where my family comes from, and to, like, because I have had a desire to do that for a long time now, but reading a book that, you know, talks about it is really encouraging to, you know, make me feel like I'm not alone in that I have a heritage, but I feel disconnected from it. Like I'm not the only one that feels that way. So I really enjoyed and appreciated that, and this was a 5-star for me, and I'm undecided if this is going to go on favorite shelf too, but I kind of almost want to put it on there because of how much I connected to the character. So we are finally to the last book. Ladies and gentlemen, one of these days I'm going to get through an entire wrap-up without having to change my battery, okay? That is my new goal. Okay, so alright, the last book was The Plunge, all about love and relationships. This is by Amy Perez. It's an adult nonfiction, which I read digitally as an audiobook or as a PDF for audiobook, so I did narrate this title. Honestly, I don't have a ton of thoughts on this. The only real complaint I have is, like, I feel like the name The Plunge doesn't really accurately describe the content of the book, because, like, instead of it being more of like a plunge into an in-depth type thing, it's more of like an overview of all of these different theories and ideas of like love and relationships, and it's kind of more of a starting point, I feel like, than like a plunge deep dive type thing. It's more of like a, here are all of these, you know, ideas that you can go and look further into and see what resonates with you and what works with what you're trying to accomplish within your relationships, you know? But really good information. It has, like, you know, the 5 love languages and, you know, different things, theories about, you know, how there are different types of love and all that kind of stuff, and like how to deal with it in a way that works with your particular relationship with a person, what kinds of love need to be present in specific kinds of relationships, stuff like that. So it's like a good overview to kind of like get you headed in the right direction when it comes to looking for more things. I feel like it's like a guide to finding the types of books that you need, and like getting you familiar with some of the things that you'll probably see in other books if you're looking further into this topic. So overall, I rated it 4 stars. Yeah. Okay, so that is everything that I completed in May and June. Hopefully I will be able to get this edited quickly. I'm working on it, y'all. I'm working on trying to get a system that works. Someday I'm gonna have it down. It's gonna be amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon in another video. Peace out, Bear Scouts.
About your worries and your stress. I mean it, bare necessities. That's why a bear can rest at ease with just the bare necessities of life. Yeah, with just the bare necessities of life.